welcome everyone to this panel, really fascinating topic around the future of nature and AI, and how AI might open up new pathways for what we're able to imagine. I'm personally feel a very personal connection to this, even though I am not an AI person. And I imagine if you've chosen to be here, it's because you hold something quite personal about nature and connection. We have two great people to join us today. Unfortunately, we did have a third speaker, Dr. Al Mahood, and he's not able to join us today because of a competing commitment, unfortunately. But it means we give some more time to our two guest panelists. And I'm going to have you introduce yourself briefly, initially, to our collective group here.
Thanks, Ariel. I'm Jane Lawton. I'm the Director of Impact at an organization called Earth Species Project. We are essentially using AI to decode animal communication, or put more simply, we are trying to understand what animals are saying. And I just want to add, this is not because it's cool. It's super cool. It's not because we can. We firmly believe we can with all of the advances that we're seeing in artificial intelligence these days. It's because we believe that in order to solve for the biodiversity and the climate crises that we're experiencing now, we've heard a lot about this over the last day or so, we need to be able to learn to listen and understand nature better. And fundamentally, remember that we're part of nature and not separate from it. And so we're really interested in figuring out ways in which we can use AI to help kind of bridge that divide.
Wow. Yeah, I'm Koert van Mensvoort. I'm the founder and director of Next Nature, an international non-profit that explores how nature is not static, but dynamic and also changes along with us. And I strongly believe we should not go back to nature, but rather forward to nature, into a next nature.
Thank you, Koert and Jane. In our pre-conversations, one of the themes that really came up was this idea of seeing what is unseen and has always been there, or hearing what is unheard but has always been there. And whether it's in the history of our relationship into nature, or what we are already part of systems to which we don't have a type of awareness of. And there is what I love about futures is that it is the opportunity for us to see those blind spots and to have those types of conversations, and then imagine what changes when we can see in those new ways about how we interact with the systems around us. One of the quotes that I was inspired by from that conversation, and some of you may have heard this before, it's by David Foster Wallace, and it's the story of two fish that are swimming through an ocean. So two young fish are swimming through an ocean. An older fish swims by and says, "Hey boys, how's the water?" And after the old fish swims further, one young fish turns to the other and says, "What the hell is water?" And I feel like that in conversation with our two guest panelists today, that was the experience I had, was seeing the ocean in a way I had not seen the ocean before. So my opening question to them, to which they both will respond, is what will we be able to see or hear that we've not seen or heard before? And then how might that change us? And so I will go first to Jane, who'll share her response.
Thank you, Ariel. And I think we would be remiss if we did not actually bring the voice of nature into this room today, if we just talked about it as human beings. So I am going to take the liberty of showing you a few slides and bringing a few sounds into the room. To click through these. So I'm going to play you a sound and would love you to think just for a minute about what you might be hearing. Any thoughts?
Is it rhubarb?
It's not rhubarb, but you're close. Anybody else? Not spinach, but these folks are exactly on the right track. This is the sound of a tomato plant in distress because it hasn't been watered for a long time. And this research comes from some scientists at the University of Tel Aviv. Basically, they have recorded the sounds of tomato plants, which they communicate in the ultrasonic. So there's no way we can hear them because it's beyond our range of perception. And they basically recorded it over a period of an hour and then sped up those recordings and translated it into a frequency that we can hear. So, plants can make sounds. Other research, also from University of Tel Aviv, is that plants can hear. This is an evening primrose flower, and the experiments that they ran, essentially, they played a whole bunch of different sounds to evening primrose flowers, and only when they played them the sounds of an approaching pollinator did they see that the plants almost immediately produced more and sweeter nectar in response to that sound. So they are able to sense the approach of this particular creature that is in symbiosis with them. So, this just opens up a whole new world for us. And what we, need to recognize, you walk out into a field and you see a bunch of plants and you think it looks really great. There's probably a lot going on in that space that we are just not, we're not connecting with. In fact, it's probably a barrage of sound. And, if you bring it into your life today, if you're sitting at home and you have houseplants and maybe you have a cat, plants are emitting signals at around 75 kilohertz. We hear up to 20 kilohertz. Your cat can hear up to 75 kilohertz. So we don't actually know this, but it is possible that your cat is hearing your plants calling out for water, and you have absolutely no idea that this exchange is taking place. So I think it just, it kind of brings home for us what's going on in the world around us. And so many things that we had no idea are responding to sound. This is the sound of a healthy coral reef. All of the different fish and snapping shrimp and the actual corals themselves. And I think what's really cool here is that we used to think that coral larvae were just sent out in these mass spawning events. Billions of them just pushed out into the ocean. They floated around, landed where they landed. And now the research shows that if you play the sound of a healthy coral reef to coral larvae, they will navigate toward that sound. Again, we don't actually know yet how they do this. And so what I love is it points out the human limitations. It points out how little we know about what nature is actually doing right now. And all the while, we're in the process of destroying it before we can figure it out. One more sound I wanted to play for you. Again, I'd love you to think about what this might be. Anyone? A ghost? It's not a monkey. Not the rainforest. It's actually one animal. It is a cetacean. It's a beluga whale. And belugas are incredibly social animals. So this always makes me think, oh my God, there are sounds like this happening under the ocean. But then this is a video of what happens when belugas get together. They are so social. This is Cunningham Inlet in Nunavut in Canada. And, this should be a dream for an ethologist, right? They put hydrophones in the water. They are collecting that sound you heard before, lots of this all happening at once. It should be incredible. But the problem is that there is actually the basic challenges of denoising recordings taken from the ocean. There's the challenge that they're all speaking at the same time. And they can't actually figure out which animals are vocalizing. It all overlaps. So I think this is important just in recognizing that artificial intelligence can help us with very basic challenges that have plagued biologists for a really long time. We can do automatic denoising now of recordings. We can do automatic source separation. And then we can also go further to say, okay, if you were trying to understand the meaning in some of this, how do you speed up the really basic tasks of detecting vocalizations in a recording when you've got thousands of hours? How do you classify automatically those vocalizations into categories that humans already know are alarm calls or affiliation calls or those kinds of things? So the kind of work that we're doing is working with researchers to accelerate this kind of analysis of recordings. And then we're going, we're going many steps further, but one of the steps that we're taking is one of the tools that's used by biologists often to test their hypotheses. You know, if you think that an elephant or a crow, the sound of the particular vocalization's meaning is X, you would use a playback technique to test that, right? You would record that sound, you would play it back to the animal, and then you would see how they responded in order to test whether you're on the right track or not. And of course, now using AI, we can take that much further by generating novel vocalizations. So these are zebra finches in a lab in Montreal at McGill University, and we are developing models that can actually hear what the bird is saying and generate a new response to that and get into two-way communication with those birds. So if you watch the sound bar, the first part of this sound is the birds themselves. The second part is generated by our AI model. Sorry, now it went across. Anyway, you can see. So this is super exciting. It could yield all kinds of new insights about how animals are communicating, the structure of that. The kind of kicker there is that the model may be communicating, maybe in two-way communication, and we will likely not know what the meaning of that exchange is, which brings up a whole host of other things that I know we're going to touch on a little bit later. So that's kind of the end of my sharing and bringing the voice of nature into the room. But in terms of what it means for us, do you want me to carry on and do that now?
Why don't we go to the next
Let's do
presentation
that.
and then come back and
Okay.
sort of say, what does that mean about how it changes how we see ourselves?
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Well, right now, at this very moment I am speaking, there are more people flying in an airplane somewhere across the globe than that people lived on the surface of the planet 70,000 years ago. So, yeah, how did we get here? And yeah, I think in this room, if you do a quick poll, like who boarded an airplane recently to arrive here in Dubai, please raise your hand if you did. Yeah, that's kind of where we are. And now we're here, and we are futuring nature. So I think we better make the best of it. And I've seen wonderful panels already. People trying to save nature, restore our balance with nature, but hardly ever we asked ourselves the question like, what is nature, and what is our image of nature? How might it be changing today and towards the future? I think if we get into that story, we need to start at the beginning. And I show you a picture of a baby photo of our planet Earth. This is our planet some 4.5 billion years ago. When it came into existence, it was just this lonely rock floating in space. And it had a geosphere, but it took some 3 billion years before a biosphere evolved upon our planet. 3 billion years before life fully evolved upon our planet. That's a long time. And then 1 billion years later, people emerged. So yeah, we've just arrived. However, clearly our presence does not go unnoticed, because with our ingenuity and creativity and technology, we now cause this rising of a technosphere on our planet. And recently, scientists calculated that if you put all technology on a scale, so yes, that's your smartphone, your laptop, also your car, maybe this entire building, these are all inventions. If you put that on a scale, then that is already heavier than when you put all biology on our planet on a scale. Plants, fungi, animals, humans. So the technosphere is already heavier than the biosphere. And just like this biosphere evolved upon a geosphere that was already underneath for a very long time and also has all kinds of interactions with it, well, now this technosphere is emerging on the biosphere and also has all kinds of interactions with it. And we did it, you know. We humans, we caused this, but it was never really a big plan, you know. It was not this big moonshot project of humanity to create a technosphere. No, it kind of happened to us. We kind of stumbled upon it. And it also shows us that we are not the masters of the universe. We're not in control of everything. We do things, and then things have certain effects that add up. And where do we go from here? I think the most important agenda for us in this generation right now is to basically balance this technosphere with this biosphere and find ways to look at the old nature and connect it to the next nature. So basically, I think we need a love story between biology and technology. This is important because this is not happening on 3 spheres. This is all happening on 1 sphere that happens to be, our planet.
Thank you so much, Koert. And it's interesting listening to both of you because I have this falling in love with technology, and then you show me how much technology there is, and I'm like, oh, that's not circular, the environmental footprint, the toxic footprint of that, and then I have this resistance to embrace part of what you're describing.
And I think often rightly so, because it's a big disruption, obviously, that we all notice. But it's our task to turn it into balance. And I think we should not do that by ignoring it or trying to push it away, because the technosphere, well, it's not going away anymore. We cannot go back, and evolution moves on. But we have to find this way to make better connections. And of course, Jane showed us some beautiful examples already.
I'm going to go, I think, first to you, Koert, in terms of you creating that call to action of saying that we need to think about this differently. We need to embrace that this is part of our legacy and do so responsibly. Where do you see that happening, and what would be some examples of that? And I will come back to ask this question to you, Jane.
Yeah, I think there are many bad examples, but we need to search for the positive examples and the opportunities. And of course, this panel is also about how we can use AI to better connect with the biological world. And I think there's an opportunity there, because basically artificial intelligence can help us understand the otherness that is all around us, you know, in the biological world. And at the same time, artificial intelligence itself is also a certain kind of otherness. And we are like smacked in the middle as humanity, in between the born and the made, I would say. But we're also this connector or this catalyst. And if we push artificial intelligence in that direction, that we say, yes, we want to employ this in a way that makes connections between the biosphere and the technosphere, then I'm less worried, and I'm optimistic that we can find a path that is not only rewarding for humanity or a few billionaires, but that is rewarding for all life on our planet and the planet at large.
And I want to come back to that because you're starting to speak to the how we do this, and I think the how implicitly means who's at the table, and recognizing that actually some of these mindsets in terms of connection to nature, not seeing the separateness we've had for centuries in history. So I'm going to come back to the how in a moment, but I do want to go back to my original question to you, Jane, in terms of how have you changed, or how do you think, looking to the future, either individually, reflecting on that experience, or looking to the future, how has the work that you've done with Earth Species Project changed how you see yourself, or how you think humanity might begin to see ourselves?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think just seeing the reactions of the audience, I always love it when I play sounds to people, because I think we're surprised by what is going on out there. And I think what AI can do is kind of open the aperture of our perception as a species, and it does that by making things visible or audible to us that weren't there before. It also does that by finding new patterns in data. We have reams and reams and reams of data now, and we simply, as human beings, are too limited to be able to parse through that data and find the patterns, and AI is extremely good at doing that. So it's doing it in that way, but it's kind of almost opening the aperture of our imagination as well, and allowing us to think about different ways, exactly what you're describing, that we can connect to nature, imagine our relationship with nature. So for me, I think this is the part I've loved the most about my work with Earth Species Project, is becoming aware of what's going on around me. And I've always felt humbled by nature, but this deepens my humility even further. And for me, if AI can help us to understand our own limitations, I think it's already doing that, right? Because it's part of our lives now, and we go, oh my God, that thing I was trying to write for 2 days, ChatGPT did it in 10 seconds, right? So it has us going.
Not necessarily well, though,
no,
let's be honest.
not badly. It has us recognizing our own limitations, which is, for me, the most valuable lesson that we can learn at this point in our history, is that we are not necessarily as good at designing everything as we thought we were, and that our history, or the story we have told ourselves of our human exceptionalism is crumbling.
And it's a good thing. And because you mentioned limitation and humbling and modesty, still for many people it's very tempting to think like, we are the dominant species here on the planet, we are the masters of the universe, and it's this idea of the enlightenment, and knowledge is power, and then you have knowledge, you have power, and then you can design and control the world around you, and then you arrive in this perfect world. Very old-fashioned 20th century idea. And now we move in a period that we realize, like, okay, we're a very limited species. For a long time in the history of our planet, humanity was just this insignificant being with very little impact, similar to fireflies or gorillas. And then at a certain moment, we started cooking our food, gaining more energy to feed big brains, and have this neocortex, and then start manipulating everything. But we need to realize that we kind of stumbled in this situation. And I think AI is a baby, but humanity is a teenager. And we have to mature all the way to basically find a better and harmonic world. But if we see it, then next we can also take our position, more modest, more limited, and we realize we also need certain technologies in artificial intelligence to help us to operate and perceive our world at a planetary level. Because as a human being, evolved on the savannah, kind of like, okay, where's the food, scarcity, that's in our mindset. And we need to now deal with issues on a planetary level. How to cope with artificial intelligence, how to urbanize, how to cope with climate change, deforestation, all these issues, they play a role at a planetary level, and our mindset is not ready to deal with it, but hopefully we in time can develop some help, some technology, some inventions, maybe artificial intelligence, that help us to operate at a planetary level, not only for our own well-being, but for the planet at large.
Thank you. And you evoke for me this sense of, is this, we're entering into a couple decades that look quite dark, and there are these glimmers of also, particularly at this conference, of the potential for also a type of shift in mindset, the potential for a type of co-evolution in how we think about these things. It is a futures conference as well. So I want to invite you to think that if it was 10, and maybe you can challenge me on the time frame. Let's say that it's, I'll give you some leeway, not 10, but maybe 30 to 40 years from now. And we had achieved what you talk about in terms of almost a new type of consciousness, in terms of a sort of Earth citizen, a new type
Earthlings,
of Earthlings, a new type of awareness in terms of humility and co-evolution and co-creation. How do you think we would create those pathways in order to do that? And maybe even break a little bit beyond the the pockets of futurists that are already doing it, but that begin to introduce that into more of a mainstream culture?
So, yeah, I can go first on that one. I think what we're seeing today offers so many different opportunities and pathways. And if we put ourselves out 30 years, and we're fairly sure that in the next 5 years we're going to have incredible breakthroughs in decoding animal communication. That doesn't mean we're going to have Dr. Dolittle translators in our pockets. I would hope that we don't have that, because I think that could be more harmful than beneficial. But we're certainly going to have gained really, really interesting new insights, and probably ways in which AI can almost, to your point, act as a bit of an intermediary in helping us connect to and then almost understand the desires, the needs, the perspectives of other species. And if you think about the value of that as we're grappling with, how we create balance in our relationship on the planet, think about human-wildlife conflict situations as an example, right? Where we are trying to figure out how to meet the needs of wildlife and to meet the needs of human beings. And usually what happens is the perspectives of humans are weighed very heavily, and then there's a biologist who says, well, but wolves need X, Y, or Z, or bears, like to behave in this way. What if we were able to actually discern the needs, desires, and perspectives of those animals directly using AI? Like, what would be the power of that in resolving some of those conflicts? Like, how could we think about assigning value? We're talking a lot about valuing nature. I've heard that a lot. It's not necessarily a concept I agree with in terms of putting an economic value on nature. But if you flip it a little bit, if you say, okay, the mountain gorillas of Rwanda earn huge amounts of ecotourism dollars every year. In fact, they probably pretty much prop up the economy in Rwanda. If you were to vest even a portion of that money with those gorillas, and you were able to allow them to pay human agents for what they need and want from us, how might that fundamentally change our relationship with another species? And so if I put myself 30, 40 years in the future, I'm thinking about ways in which we design governance mechanisms for the planet that incorporate the perspectives of other species. And this is going to, I sort of predict that this is going to happen both in ways that confront us very dramatically, and also in ways that just start to, almost like a Trojan horse, start to infiltrate the things we're doing. I mean, we already heard about rights for nature yesterday. Like, these things are happening in courts. Like, this will slowly start to shift and become more sophisticated, and the world could look very, very different.
Are you getting some of the interest in Earth Species Project's solutions from those actors yet? Like, the people that would
Very
be
much
able
so.
are starting to pull for it?
Absolutely. So yeah, we heard, I don't know if you were in the room yesterday, but we heard from Grant Wilson of the Earth Law Center on rights for nature, and we're beginning to explore, like, if we put ourselves 5-10 years in the future, and you can discern from another species its desires and needs, what does that start to look like in a court of law? What needs to be admissible for that voice of nature to actually be weighed in a judgment?
Yeah, and this is fascinating because already you see nature, we try to represent nature in the boardroom, and then typically it's this human being that takes this position in that boardroom representing nature, but now you see it also already moving towards, like, okay, let's ask an artificial intelligence to represent other biological beings in the boardroom, because maybe they can do a better job. And I think that's also, for me, it's a love story between biology and technology that we need. And it's a different world. We will stumble. It will not be perfect straight away. But I think in that direction to explore, I see a lot happening in the next few decades. And also I like to respond to what you mentioned about, basically connecting economy and ecology, right? Because now we have this financial system that we humans, we made it, although we don't really control it. It's almost like an ecology in its own right. And I think bankers can still learn a lot from farmers who have huge experience of coping with ecologies that you do not control entirely. Think of the weather, the climate. You're not in control, but you deal with it. You kind of guide its growth. And I think in our financial system the same is happening, but we don't have the mindset yet. Plus, it's disconnected from the biological world. So, yeah, I think we need to start creating eco-currencies and eco-coins that we reward positive, sustainable behavior. And that you actually get paid if you do good for the planet. So yes, if you are this group of gorillas that has a small portion of area but a big impact on tourism, well, we should pay them. And yeah, how to organize that, I don't have all the answers right now, but there are lots of smart people in the room, and I think we should just turn this into a project and do it in the next few decades.
I am aware of the dopamine hit of tech optimism, particularly to address things that really worry me and worry other people.
Yeah.
And in some of the discussions over the last few weeks, the last few days, there's been this idea that there are technologies that can provide solutions, but there are also social technologies. There are how do we have conversations in new ways? Who is in the conversation and contributing to it? And that the social technology is actually where we probably have a mini blind spots as well in terms of understanding what a just transition is. And I get concerned that we will rush into these things with best intentions and then replicate the same mistakes that we've made in the past. So could you each respond a bit in terms of, and I think part of doing a transition well is to recognize you don't have the answers, but we're going to do it together. And we're going to learn, and we're going to identify the right questions and those types of things. But with your each respective, lens on this question, where you are observing a transition, calling for a transition, can you speak to the social technology side, what you think is really important that keeps us from just replicating many of the same mistakes we've made in the past?
Shall I?
Go first.
Well, first of all, thank you for pointing this out, because it's super important, especially in future form, because futurists tend to make this mistake that we predict technological change and technological innovation, and we forget about social innovation. And it is equally important, and we have to do it. And also, the techno-optimism is risky when it becomes techno-utopism. Like technology will save us all, it will fix all our problems, and then we will basically shift the issues of today out of the frame of today in the future, and the future will fix it. And this is, of course, super problematic and super naive, because I think what's happening with technology is that we are playing with fire over and over again. Every time again. Every new innovation gives us new opportunities, new chances, some of we already discussed, but also new risks and new responsibilities. And I think this never ends. In that sense, nature will not let us relax, because every time that we think, okay, we have this new connection with nature and now we're in a good conversation, then nature likes to hide itself, and it shows itself in different spots, and in that sense is this infinite sparring partner that we live with.
Thank you. Jane?
Yeah, I think, I mentioned when I was bringing the sounds in, the zebrafinch experiment and the implications of generative AI and getting into two-way conversation with other species. This is less about the human social dimension, but more about the social dimension among the other cultures that we are planning to connect with. We could get to a point fairly quickly where we are messing with other cultures. We could develop technology that can be used very effectively by poachers, and it already being used in commercial agriculture to more effectively control animals, so that we can produce them more rapidly, consume them more rapidly. So I think there are huge ethical dimensions of this. We definitely need to make sure that we're thinking about the responsibilities that we're bringing into being at the same time we're bringing this new tech into being. And so, like, there's so much there. There are so many layers. It's going to require a huge community to think about these challenges together and to get out ahead of it in terms of creating ethical guardrails around this. We already know about the huge challenges with creating ethical guardrails around social media. Like, we did not get out ahead of that. We are trying to do so now with AI, but it's really a bit too late. This tech is actually still in its infancy, and if we moved quickly, we could do that. And actually, there was some comment made yesterday about regulation essentially being backward-looking. I think in this case, it has the potential to be forward-looking, and we really need to go there. But also, I think, I mean, you know, for me, if you ask me what I think the dangers or the risks are of this, the biggest risk that I really personally feel is that we trivialize it, that it becomes a commercial application, to my point about you got your Dr. Dolittle on your phone. That just becomes novelty, and it doesn't change then anything in our relationship to other species. So we really have to find ways to guard against that and make sure that we're really, we're using this for transformation.
And how do we do that in a field where there are also these power relations with people who, just want to go?
You mentioned governance, and whenever people speak about this future, I often get an image of almost a new ecosystems of new types of organizations that are sort of midwifing us into this new transition, that it won't be, you know, one or two leaders, it'll be an ecosystem of leaders. Are there indigenous actors and communities that are in this conversation that are helping to create that infrastructure for the transition?
I mean, I think there need to be. We are not yet working directly with indigenous communities, but clearly, you know, we talk about a new relationship with nature. It's not actually a new relationship with nature. It's almost a renewed relationship with nature, not going back necessarily, going forward into something different, but also learning from the past. So those conversations do need to begin. And you know, when you think about the ethical dimensions as well, right? I mean, you're thinking about data that is being gathered from other species. Do they have rights around that data? Do we need to license that data from them? Do we need to be working with indigenous communities who potentially have had deep relationships with other species, already own, in a sense, part of that IP in terms of how we connect with other species? All of these are huge questions
to be
as
explored.
well.
Yeah.
Did you want to respond to that?
Well, I think the relationship with indigenous communities, well, it's already happening. In that sense, the cliché is the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. But I think it's quite popular niche already. And it's a big difference with a decade ago. So you see that development, and we can have more of it. Because always it's the case that at a certain point you think something is so not relevant anymore that then it becomes very relevant again. Because this is also this cycle that we're in with new innovations and changes of thinking. But every time you learn something, you often also unlearn something. And then at a certain moment you have to go back to the intuition, to the tradition, to the community that still has that knowledge, and you should not just copy it or go back, but you should transform it. I think we need innovative nostalgia, right? So we can be nostalgic about the past, but we can never copy it into the future, but we can transform it in an innovative way in the future.
I often think of weaving seagrass, and you're bringing all these different threads together. We have a bit of time now, and I think we have about 5 minutes. Oh, look at the hands go up. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, but we need to get you a mic. And so one, and then your second, and then your third.
Hi, Elaine Franz from Flow in Action. Forgive me if this is thinking it out loud. In the same way Google is now buying up data centers and wind farms to offset its GHG emissions, I'm interested in what you think about nature capital and the rights of nations to own like their nature capital data, but also the threat of multinationals in relation to ESG kind of buying up tracts of land almost to silence the nature or to offset it, the black hats as well as the white hat version of what might go forward. There is a question in there somewhere. I'm not entirely sure
But
what
do
it
you
is.
think of the power dynamics at a national level in terms of multinationals, national governments, and that nature may lose in that?
Yeah.
Good enough?
Well, the risk is, of course, more commodification and flattening of things. And then after that, we realize, oh, it was so much richer than we thought it was. So yes, this is big risk. At the same time, you can then take the position, nature has this huge value, you can never put a number on it, so let's not do it. But if you don't dare to step in that space, then the value might be there somewhere in your mind, but it's not being articulated. And that means that it will not have value in our financial system. So if we connect these things, we have to move in that space. We will stumble, but we have to do it. And I think there's a path around not so much commodifying, but putting value on sustainable behavior, positive sustainable behavior that we need. Because right now, if I am a farmer in the rainforest, I have a choice. I can cut the forest down, burn it down, grow soy, and then I will earn money for my family. But if I let it be, then I get, well, maybe an applause from some other countries, but I should be paid to steward this rainforest and have positive sustainable behavior towards it. I think we can do it, we can organize it, and we just have to put our mind to it.
And I think what you're raising around data in particular and who owns the data, these are questions we're asking ourselves. When we are using recordings of vocalizations of another species, currently that data is typically owned by an institution or an individual researcher. We're trying to advocate for more open data repositories. Mm-hmm. The good news is you'd think in this space that data is the biggest challenge, that we need more and more and more data coming directly from animal sources in order to train machine learning models. But what's really, really interesting is that the latest models, we've just published one, actually rely on small annotated data sets of animals and huge data sets that are publicly available that are not annotated yet. And then huge data sets from human speech and music. And this is where you recognize that we are animals too. So the models can actually learn from our patterns and actually begin to recognize the vocalizations of another species that they've never encountered before, having been trained on some animal data sets, some human vocalizations, and human speech and music. So what that says to me is the good news is that there's almost a freeing up, and there will be less kind of, we need a data mode around all of this. There's a lot of data that is already publicly available that can be used.
It's a new project, Future of Data Governance for Nature. And,
Yeah.
and I'm, to my panelists, I think we have about 4 or so minutes. So our responses need to be concise.
I'll make it quick. First of all, thank you to the speakers. Really, I learned a lot from this very short time. I think this panel should be a plenary panel on the main stage, because really I believe that we need to be a little bit more wiser when it comes to the. I'm a technologist, but I am a naturist at the same time. I love nature, and when I think of the things that you said, Dr. Koert, and I look now on the progress, and you said, like, we cannot go back, we are moving forward. We reached to the point now where we have number of phones exceeded the population on Earth, 8-point-something billion phones against 7 billion population. And if I probably correctly, hear Elon Musk saying that within the next maybe 10 years, we will have humanoid robots exceeding the population on Earth. Now, going with this technosphere, clutter, are we really, going to be able to really strike that balance between biology and between technology, especially when you're speaking about AI. I'm putting AI into humanoids and converging biology with technology. How that is going to really... Okay, I'm not saying that there is wrong with the technology. Definitely it can do many good things. But as we've seen it now with AI, I should say I'm very pessimistic at the moment.
Thank you for pointing out the risk. And
Thank you.
You know, you're right. I think your question is, can the technosphere exist without the biosphere? Can it exist without humanity? And maybe some people believe that the technosphere can exist without humanity and the biological world as we knew it. Well, definitely, I play for Team Human, you know. So I like a future for humanity in the balance between the biosphere and the technosphere. But I agree, it is a risk. And sometimes I feel we not only need to save the polar bear and the rainforest, but humanity as well. You know, there's something at stake. Good luck, everyone.
That's not the final word, just a minute. Do you mind, Jane, if I go to the next question and then we can hear that response?
It was pretty similar.
It was quite similar. Then, Jane, do you want to respond to that excellent question?
No, I don't think I have anything to add.
So then I guess Team Human, good luck is the closing comment of the panel. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And thank you to our panelists. Could we give them a...
There was one.
Oh, wait. Oh, sorry. Hold on.
Hold on.
Oh.
Adapt. The future is changing. We have one more question.
One quick question. Thank you so much for your updates and the information you shared. It was so beneficial. But I just wanted to go back to the first thing you mentioned about the idea of seeing the unseen and hearing the unheard. What about if we think about it oppositely and saying, unseeing the seen and unhearing the heard, will that play a role in paving the way or shaping a new scenario for the future?
You mean quieting what is already...
We have things that we are seeing, maybe they are not benefiting and shaping the future. So what about those?
Is that perhaps about changing our perceptions?
Right, yes.
Right, so received wisdom, things we think we already know. I think that's huge. I think all of this could be really transformative. I mean, one of the things I feel is that actually science, incredible. It's brought us to this point in many, many different areas. Yet it also restricts us. It keeps our view often fairly narrow and fairly limited. Even the fact that most scientists will not acknowledge that there could be the possibility of language in another species because we have narrowly defined what the hallmarks of language are, and they are anthropocentric. So how do we use technology almost to relearn, to reteach ourselves, to flip things? I think that's absolutely what we're trying to do.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.